Welcome everybody. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to TCR Trinity Competitive Racing.
Well, TCR TJ is the Season 13 Golden Class Champion for Trinity Competitive Racing.
Oh, let's go, dude! Yes!
Jabbar on the podium! He's on it by a 10! Gentlemen, side by side through one. And silent, and Seafreeze gets a half spin.
Let's fucking go!
Wheel bumping.
DRS enable, let's do it.
And Captain Blade battling it out for position. Captain Blade.
Ickle, what the?
Then McChicken goes around and he also makes
Rewind down the front straight. Oh my god.
I gotta check the heart rate.
Why do we do this? Because of nights like this.
Go.
Yo, welcome everybody to TCR, Trinity Competitive Racing, and welcome to episode 15 of the Racing Debrief Teasers podcast, where we combine the world of e-racing, sim racing, and TCR with real-life motorsports and Formula One, a true racing enthusiasm. I'm your host, Seafreeze. We're alongside co-host Chabar, producer D'Angelo, behind the scenes, and we have a special episode tonight. As we're recording on November 6th, 2022, we have newly crowned 3-time Platinum Class champion. He clinched it, I guess, this last race in Platinum at the TCR Grand Prix, the 7th seasonal event at Bahrain, and he claimed his 3rd championship in Platinum. The, I guess, second driver, but first to tie myself at 3 championships in the Platinum class. He's the first driver to claim back-to-back Platinum class championships. And he tied another previous Platinum class champion of Go-To Guy in grabbing a second win at the TCR Grand Prix. Go-To Guy had 2. Taz, or B-Tom, but primarily I'll be referring to him as Taz or Tasmanian, also had 2 TCR Grand Prix wins. His first championship was back in season 11, and then he won it the last 2 seasons in 13 and 14 respectively, and we're going to get a little bit of insight of him today on his championship. So welcome guys, and yeah. Let's talk some TCR tonight.
Sounds good.
Awesome. When did you think throughout the season that you kind of had it wrapped up as far as the championship? Because coming into this season, it seemed like we did have a fairly competitive grid. Pretty much all throughout the field, and it seemed by a certain point it came down to less and less drivers. At what point did you feel like you had it under control?
That's a good one. Honestly, I don't really think about it in terms of like, okay, yeah, I've got it, pretty much wrapped up here or anything like that. I just kind of take it race by race and try and do the best I can. I mean, obviously, you do try and play the numbers game to a certain extent because, if you have a gap, then you can afford to, take less risks and potentially give some points away just to make sure you get, a decent result. But if I had to say one round, maybe Abu Dhabi. I think that was a pretty significant point swing. Because originally it was going to be point swing in favor of professional because I had my 2 incidents with Jose. But then we got a late safety car and he decided to stay out in the hards, which turned out to be the wrong choice. And I guess there was a bit of desync and he had an incident with HVAC, which kind of ruined his race, which, was a shame because he probably would have gone on to win it, but instead I think he finished 8th, and I managed to get on the podium. So Yeah, I mean, there were a couple moments like that this season. Australia comes to mind. I think Professional had a wheel disconnect or something like that, which, I mean, I know is probably very annoying because I had a similar thing about a year and a half ago in a race. I was fighting for the win, and a few laps from the end, it disconnected, and I went straight on into the wall. So, yeah, I think I don't know because it's been hard to predict. Of course, Professionals had some bad luck, and I've had a little bit of bad luck. Probably not to the same extent, but yeah, I think one. Yeah, I think Abu Dhabi for sure. Yeah, Abu Dhabi.
Now, coming into the season, I guess, I mean, I would say a good majority. I think we can probably, I don't know if Jabbar or D'Angelo, if you can kind of go back to one of those preseason podcasts and see who
Yeah, I'll
had the
check.
most votes for the championship, but pretty sure you were most likely a favorite coming into this one, as you won last season. Coming into this one, did you feel like you were the favorite?
I felt less confident coming into this season than I did last season. Not so much because the grid was more competitive, just because I felt much less comfortable with this game, and I still am not as comfortable with this game as I have been with the last two. But I mean, I still felt pretty confident that I could win it. But yeah, I knew it was. Or I at the time I had a feeling it was gonna be pretty tough. It's been a really strong grid, and it seemed like a lot of drivers kind of got to grips with the game a lot faster than I did. So
All right, I have the preseason survey results up. Um, B-Tom had the most first place votes with 10. The next closest was Flip Flop with 6, and then Professional with 3, and then a bunch with 1 or 2.
Is that kind of how you did coming into this season? Who did you have as your main rival or main threat? As if maybe if I wasn't going to win it, who and could have won it if you did not, or multiple people even. Because coming into this season, I think I even when we were discussing the podcast, I really liked Flip Flop Fish as far as his speed, and I thought, is this the year we'll actually see him put a whole season in? It's been a few seasons that he had one, but I kind of had him as my circle as someone who could maybe do something. But who did you have, if anyone? Or you come and say, nah, all these guys are way off from me. What do you think?
um, well, I mean, at the start of the season, I thought Forzen would be pretty tough to beat because I mean he was super quick
He
when
had
the
the
game
pole
first
at
came
the
out.
first race, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think he had a pretty decent margin to second as well. And the thing is, he has some some issues with his not issues, but certain weaknesses. So like sometimes he makes stupid mistakes, either on his own or when fighting wheel to wheel. And then of course he's in Sweden, so there's a time zone difference, and for him it would be hard to make every race. So very quickly he kind of got ruled out, and then the second one was Professional. I looked at some of the preseason races that I didn't race, and obviously in the races we did have together, he was always really strong. So, um, yeah, I kind of expected him to be a pretty big challenge, which I mean that turned out to be the case. So, yeah, those were probably like the main two.
Now, you've been racing since season 10 in TCR, and Professional was a part of, I would say, I think every season since then. I don't think he took any seasons off, but obviously this is probably his best statistical season in TCR. I don't know if his earlier, more season. I know professional raced back in, I believe it was season 4 that he debuted in, and I think he did have 2 wins that season, and he was fighting for the championship. He came in like a few races late, but he ended up being runner-up. But he's definitely had obviously a lot more competitive grid today, a lot more consistency. He probably has more points total than way back when. But how do you view a competitor where their previous seasons might not have been as strong, and then from one season to the next, it seems like they kind of turn it on? If you go back to probably season 10 and look where he was, and each season him continuing to get better, how do you kind of view him as a threat, even though he hasn't been in that situation a long time? Does that have anything to do with it?
I don't really take previous seasons into account because there's a lot of factors at play. I mean, when I first joined TCR in season 10, I mean, I was probably more often than not in the midfield. It was only towards the end of the season where I started fighting a bit closer towards the front, but I don't think I ever really had um, quite enough pace to get over the line up until the very last race of the season in Mexico when I won my first race. But in season 11, I mean, that was probably my most dominant season as I won 8 out of 12 races, and I just felt pretty much outrun with the game at the time. I think part of that is just down to the pandemic and everything, and having nothing better to do, so I was just on the game a lot.
I think a lot of us were at that time. It was actually a really great time for sim racing because
Yeah,
you had everybody available for commentators, you had everybody available for reserve drivers, the grids were full, everybody was prepared and practiced, and that was a really good time in sim racing, and even like TCR and many, even motorsports too. We got to go to all these different tracks that we weren't really able to go to if this pandemic didn't happen. So, of course, a lot of negatives with that. The racing community had a huge uptick all throughout, real life and simulation. And I was gonna say, going through, how did you kind of balance that practice time? Because I know I guess the last few seasons have kind of been limited towards that. You were only able a certain amount of time to practice due to, outside real life activities. Did that have any effect to maybe when you were racing back in season 11 during the pandemic where you had a lot of game time, or did you have to adjust to that? How did it affect you at all going from, maybe a lot of time on the game, a lot of knowledge on the game, to maybe, okay, I have to really pick my points here?
yeah. I mean, it definitely had an effect. I mean, 2020 when I had all the time in the world, I could pretty much nail the setup down to a T, and I knew the strategy, pretty much perfectly, and things like that. And then, there's the fact that I'm just more comfortable with the game since I'm playing it more often. Um, so going into season 13 and season 14, where I'm, basically with college and other things, um, I've had to be a bit smarter with how I spend my time practicing. 'Cause usually I only get like an hour, maybe if I'm lucky, 2 hours to practice for a race, and it's kind of hard to do that with this game because time trial setups, they don't really work too well in this game. Uh, Part of that's because you end up having pretty poor straight line speed time trial setups, even though they're quite good over one lap. They're not very good in the race because uh, they're just with the traction. It's not very good as the tires start to wear, and then with the way that ERS in this game, it's very hard to recover it with higher wings. So um, I try and minimize the time I spend in time trial, and then just try and hop straight into quality practice because track position is really important. And then if I have time, I'll do race practice. But for the past couple races, I've only done quality practice, so I think my race pace has taken a bit of hit as a result of that, but it's not been massive.
He can.
Earlier, there was a moose outside of my house. It was kind of crazy. He was just sitting there chilling in my backyard.
Yeah, he can cut this. He can cut this out when he gets back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did you say you saw a moose?
Yeah, it
Really?
was in my
Did you live
backyard.
in
Yeah.
Ohio?
Oh damn. Ohio.
Yeah.
I had no idea there's moose in Ohio. Are you sure? Like, you sure it just wasn't like a big deer?
No.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Because I mean, my backyard's it's pretty big, and it's just like a bunch of trees and stuff.
Uh huh.
Mm.
So
That's cool.
yeah, you're just like laying down. I'm like, wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
I've never seen much more interesting stuff in my backyard at home than like a skunk or a possum. Bunnies.
I was taking out the trash, and you're just chilling now, like a good 10, 15 feet away. It's like, wow,
Oh shit. Those things are
it's interesting.
those things can fuck you up. They're
Yeah.
big and strong and fast.
But he was just chilling, so
Have
I
you ever
was
seen a
just like,
video of a moose like running through snow and it's just like a train just clearing the way?
yeah, it's crazy. But I just stayed clear. He was chilling, so I was like, yeah, not gonna mess with it. Plus, he'd fuck me up anyway. So
Oh yeah. I'd be nervous even.
yeah,
There's moose in Ohio.
That was news
Sorry,
to
I'm
me
back.
too.
Breeze, did you die for a second?
No, sorry. I mean, there's a whole shit stuff happening. I don't know.
Like
Eh,
what?
I'm looking. That'll be for later. I don't know. I'm just sitting here. I'm looking out, and there's a whole commotion outside. So
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't be looking outside. Maybe I should close the blinds.
All right. Cut this
But-
part. Continue.
No, we'll keep it all in. No, I'm kidding. I'll definitely cut it.
Keep the moose conversation.
I might keep the moose conversation. All right, we're back. So it was your third championship. Do you look back? What do you think is your strongest championship? What is your weakest, or do you equal them all the same? Do you look at that sort of stuff?
I'm going to rank them just because I
Okay.
think that's more interesting.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm gonna put season 11 last,
Ooh,
even
wow.
though it's my most dominant. I don't really think I had much competition that season. I mean, we had Passassin, but he was kind of getting up to speed with no line, and then we had Sequit, but he just wasn't as good as he was in season 10, in my opinion.
I agree.
I mean, I was driving really well that season, but I think to a certain extent, you're only as good as your competition.
Mhm.
So I think in terms of like the level I was at, it was still high, but the fact that I didn't have super hard competition, it kind of makes it easier since there's not really any pressure. You're just kind of going out, doing your thing, and then winning races. Unless I threw away the strategy, which I did a couple times. Where I forgot to load
Or
the setup.
not loading a setup. Yeah. Honestly, if you loaded that setup in the GP, you might have had 3 GP wins.
Yeah. And then second place, I'll probably put season 12. I think I made more
Over
mistakes that
13.
season.
You mean 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, 13.
We're getting up in the numbers. It's hard for me too.
Yeah.
13.
I think I
Yeah.
made more mistakes that season.
Mhm.
You
know how many
They
wins
weren't
you had
like-
last season?
7.
Okay.
They weren't super big mistakes or anything. But Portugal comes to mind. It was like getting a 3-second time penalty on the last lap just for running off the track. It's kind of silly. And Singapore, I kind of went for a move on bats that didn't work out, and I kind of threw away an opportunity to maybe get second there. And then, of course, we had the Jeddah and Abu Dhabi situation where I probably could have avoided both of those had I been a bit smarter in those situations.
Won that Abu Dhabi race?
Bats did.
Bats did,
Bats,
okay.
yeah,
Bats took the Jeddah one too, the son of a bitch.
right. Yeah, he won both races I did poorly in. So
he always was
gained
there to capture it, and unfortunately he hasn't been really around this season, but
yeah, he gained like 40 something points on me in 2 races. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, season 13, I think I've had, tougher competition, but I've also, would say, had a little bit more luck in terms of like professional being unlucky and things like that.
Mhm.
But
Have you had any like difficulties throughout this season, particularly? I know you said earlier that professional had like some wheel issues at Australia when it got disconnected, or it seemed like he had some issues either with strategy, as we saw last week, or maybe the safety cars not coming out favoring his strategy, although his driving might have been good. Did you have anything that stood out as far as like, man, I either was not in my control or it was in my control and I wish I could have changed that?
Japan comes to mind for sure. I had really good pace there. I put in a pretty decent amount of practice for that one. But on my first hot lap, I spun and then I rejoined the track at a bad time and got collected by a chicken. So I had to
McChicken,
start.
yeah.
Yeah, I had to start from the back of the grid, and ended up recovering to third despite getting damage on lap 1 from, I think it was HVAC. He just didn't see me and he kind of chopped across me and spun me out. This was on the exit of the final corner. I was kind of on the right, he was on the left, and he just kind of swooped over. It was unfortunate, but I think I definitely could have won that had I not messed up quali. Another one that comes to mind is Baku. I had a horrible qualifying, probably my worst qualifying at least in TCR, and probably that's the last 2 seasons. So season 13 and season 14, it was just god awful.
Yeah, I've heard you're not a fan of the track, so more or
Yeah,
less.
no, I had
That was a
a
tough race, though. That was 100, not 100%, but I mean, full wet in a 50%.
yeah, and I ran a dry setup in that race. I was just all over the place. My worst track in a setup that wasn't fit for those conditions. It was pretty horrible. Still might have finished on the podium, but I mean, we know what happened in the penultimate lap with the little love tap in the castle section.
Yeah,
But
you know what? I gotta stay right up on the gearbox of the other drivers in order to really attack for that position.
yeah,
As you might have seen in Jeddah.
yeah, it kind of balanced out as
I
you
guess so.
tapped me in Baku and I tapped you in Jeddah.
Um,
In which
okay.
season? Are we still talking about this season?
Yeah, it's still season 14.
Yeah.
And then I would say,
Thanks for the clarification. It could have went either way. It really could have.
yeah,
With Jeddah. I don't know. It's between me and you and Jeddah. I don't know. I think that track we should retire, in my opinion.
it's it's okay. We just gotta and not hate each other, basically. But yeah, that and then Britain and Abu Dhabi. I think had I just started on the hards in Britain, I probably could have won.
Mm-hmm.
And then Abu Dhabi had things gone slightly different between myself and Jose, or had that last safety car not come out, I probably could have won that. But other than that, and just trying to figure out the game and experimenting with setups and just like my approach to the race, I don't really have anything I would change or struggle with.
Mm-hmm. What's been, if you could give advice to any golden class driver, silver class driver that they might be going for a championship, or even a future platinum, if let's say they get bumped up, promoted to platinum class, and they either want to maybe not go for a championship right away, but they want to do a pretty good season and then build upon that for a potential championship season. What is some advice that you would give that has helped you been successful throughout these 3 championships, and more particularly on this game? Is it the mindset, how you go across the entire season? Is it something that you have to practice? Is it avoiding incidents with certain drivers? Like, what uh, is there one thing, or is it kind of a combination? And what's the most important thing that you value?
I think it ultimately comes down to mindset and how you practice. Mindset, because I mean, in league racing, crazy stuff can happen sometimes, and if you lose your cool and start, making moves that you probably shouldn't be making or going for, and start pushing too hard or things like that, then you're just gonna, get yourself in a worse situation than you were in before. Um, you kind of have to remind yourself that certain things are out of your control, and you just have to take the cards you dealt with and do the best you can. And then with practice, you just have to make sure that the way you practice is how you intend on executing the race. So obviously, time trial, if you're spending a bunch of time in there, I mean, it can be useful for learning a track and learning where the limits are, but outside of that, it's pretty much useless. So I think you want to try and focus on the race, because I find that when you focus on race pace, naturally the quality pace comes with it. Um, but the thing is, focusing on the race is a bit more time consuming. So yeah, you kind of have to balance it out. Um, but yeah, just those two things. I think if you nail those two things, keep your head cool, just do the best you can, and make sure that you're practicing efficiently, then you should, perform to the best of your ability more often than not.
And then also, I'd like to kind of shout out your teammate a little bit, and I guess a good way, but also we've seen this week maybe not so much in a good way. Um, you as far as the constructors standings go, you guys are ahead by quite a margin. It would be probably a big upset if you guys lost. It seems like you guys will go on and win the constructors. Do you know how many constructors this would be for you? Is this your third then?
Yeah, I think so. If we go on to win this one, it would be my third.
So in season
Uh,
11, you had teammates. You were still with Stanley? Or who was your
yes.
season 11?
No,
Was
no,
that
it was
Secret?
it was actually Fike. Fike.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I that's a good what's it called? That's a good fun fact question.
TCR trivia.
TCR trivia for sure. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That wasn't my first,
But
second, or third. That was like my fourth or fifth guess.
We need to
yeah.
freeze during each race. We need to do TCR trivia, fun fact stuff during
I
each
love
race
it.
stream.
I think we should start.
Start it on
Okay.
Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was FYKV, or Fike was in that season. Season 13 was then Stanley,
Right.
and then the season was TJ. Now, TJ has probably been the most, as far, probably I would say the most competitive teammate since you had Sequid as a teammate back in season 10. Although you guys didn't win the constructors, that was Kersey and myself, the Alpha Tauris, won in season 10. But how do you compete for a championship, race wins, as well as having a teammate who is very competitive as well?
I think it really just comes down to communication. You have to understand that, while you both want to win, you can't screw the other person over to try and do it. And I think it helps that I've always been friends with people I've been teammates with. So, I'm friends with Secret. Um, I'm friends with Fika. We still keep in touch, although we don't talk as much, obviously, because he's kind of stepped away from F1 in general. He just doesn't find it as appealing anymore.
Hmm.
I don't talk with Stanley as much, although we're still cool. It's just I'm a bit busier with college and all that
Right, right.
stuff. And then TJ, we talk regularly. I still talk regularly with Secret and TJ. So yeah, and I've always had a good relationship with him. I think Secret sometimes he's a little too talkative during the race.
Yep. I was gonna say you're always in a party with your teammates. Is that right? For most races, you're always in a party chat.
So in season 14, I've pretty much always been in a party chat with TJ. Season 13 didn't really do that. Season 11, I didn't really do that either. Because every teammate's different. Some prefer to be in a party. Others are just kind of like leave me alone, let me do my thing, and we'll just stay out of each other's way. But of course, like up until the race, we'll help each other out and talk about strategy and setup and stuff like that. But I feel like in a way I'm a bit more like Secret to TJ. There's been a couple times this season where he's like, "All right, bro, just stop talking, let me focus." And it's like, "Okay, I got you." So
But
yeah,
you've been the more talkative teammate this season. Is that what you said?
yeah. Because I always try and like when I'm in a party chat, I try and do the best I can for not only my race but for my teammates. So if I think there's something important that I notice that I think they should know, then I'll tell them. Or if I think maybe they're losing their cool a little bit, I'll just try and calm them down, try and keep them focused and in control. And then, if they're doing well, then I'll kind of like big them up and stuff like that. But yeah, I think in terms of communication, it's probably been the strongest between myself and TJ. We
Hmm.
just kind of understand, what we need to do and how best to do it, so that we both, finish as high as we possibly can.
Do you prefer a teammate that can compete with you pretty regularly to almost where the teammate is always pretty much on the same portion of the track as you? Because I've always found it awkward racing my teammate if he's in the party with me and I have to overtake him. And if I do it good move, or even if we make contact, like you can literally hear them react to you. And I always never wanted like kind of any confrontation between us in the party whilst we're racing, because that would just kind of distract us from everyone else. So I've never really I didn't mind if my teammate was quick. I just never liked in some of those races they would be on the same portion of the track as me, and it's like, man, I really gotta beat this guy somehow, but he's also right in my ear too at the same time. Obviously in F1 there's a lot of times where this Mercedes, Red Bull, whatever example you want to say, other driver gets a grid penalty, or maybe they get hit and spun on the first lap. So a lot of times they're not really racing each other, but then you do see sometimes team orders get involved, and sometimes they'll disregard the team orders and they'll go on track, but sometimes that can create a confrontation. So do you like having someone competitive up front with you in the teammate in the party, or somebody who you can kind of have as like a clear number two?
I think it's kind of a balancing act because if you have a really quick teammate, there's a risk of them taking points off of you, and if you're fighting for the
Right.
championship, that's not a good thing. And I think we've seen this season that TJ's probably been as well. Probably we're probably the closest in terms of like pace across the grid.
As far as
Um,
teammate to teammate.
yeah,
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Mercedes would be the next best, I would say.
yeah. I think at the start of the season it was definitely professional and silent, but I think silent hasn't been able to show up as much, and when he has, I don't think he's had much practice, so he hasn't been at 100%. But yeah, especially recently, like TJ, she's been really on it, particularly in the race. So I mean, we saw in Bahrain, he was the quicker of the two of us, which for me, it's it's not ideal, but if you don't want your teammate taking points off you, you just have to do a better job.
Right.
So I was kind of fortunate that uh, he made the mistake that he did.
Yeah,
At
well,
the
let's
end.
let's go to that race for a little bit and highlight just a couple minutes on that. So the TCR Grand Prix 7th season was at Bahrain this previous week, Thursday. If you didn't watch the race, go watch it now. Otherwise, there's going to be spoilers. So obviously we had the format of the hot laps, the three the qualifyings, and seemed pretty diverse as far as TJ got a few, you got a few. I think who else was up there? Was it Meb? I think Meb was up there. Kind of splitting some points here and there. Going to the race, fast forward all the way towards the end of the race, it was professional leading. Then he kind of fell back. He started in the mediums, went to the mediums again. And last time I talked to him, he was kind of unsure if it was the game messing up, or maybe it was him not switching tires, or maybe he did have the tire selected, but he misclicked. He didn't have the footage, so he didn't really confirm. But he pretty much swears that he did have the correct tire and that it was the game's fault. But I guess we'll never really know. But he went on the mediums again, which means he had a pit again because he didn't satisfy all those tires. He later gets disqualified. TJ still looking for his first win in the platinum class, and he's been showing the pace for sure as of late, and seems very determined and motivated to get that win. And I really thought, as racing myself, I'm looking up front and I see you and I see professional, I see TJ. TJ was kind of leading, and it looked like he really had the pace to win on that day. And from my perspective, I see professional get disqualified, and then I'm like, oh man, now I'm like, oh, what just happened? Then I see TJ, and then you, and then me, and then I'm like, all right, so maybe it'll finish like that. TJ on the last lap, out of turn, I guess that'd be what, 7 or 8, 7 or 8ish.
Right.
Loses it on the throttle. He spins out, doesn't hit the wall, but then accelerates trying to spin the car around or get back going, and he DNFs right there. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell just happened? I thought the lobby cut out. I thought everybody, because it said migrating host right after, because I think TJ got mad and just left. And that helped you get the win and ultimately also the championship. But I mean, TJ had a really, really good race going, and he's been showing the speed and showing the pace, but just wasn't able to do it last week at Bahrain.
Yeah, I mean, it was a interesting race, not just the 50%, but the 5 lappers. I kind of touched on it in the post race interviews, but I mean, he put in a lot of time practicing for the race. I think he was practicing since like Monday. Whenever he had the spare time, he's just on practicing one shot quality, practicing for the race, and yeah, he was really quick. Whereas I kind of showed up on Thursday, and I hopped in time trial, and I was like, okay, I'll try and get up to speed. I've heard that the game is a bit different since the patch, and my initial impression was that it had changed. just because I'd done a race around Bahrain maybe 2 weeks before then, and I didn't recall struggling that much with traction. And I did that race, without any practice. So, and I felt more comfortable then than I did in the actual TCR Grand Prix. So I was just trying to close the gap to TJ. Never quite closed it. I think I was able to get there more or less in quality if I hooked up the lap, but in the race, I think he was just consistently like 2, sometimes 3 tenths quicker than me.
So, you wrapped up championship number 3. What does the future hold? What's next? Are you gonna come back and try to set the record of number 4?
Maybe. It really just depends. I did schedule my classes for spring semester, but I still have to figure out my work schedule and just figure out how busy I'll be with my coursework because it's starting to get a little bit more into the engineering stuff. But I mean, if I have the time, I'll try and go for number 4.
And
But
if your schedule doesn't allow for season 15, would you consider coming back in 16 and going for that?
again, it really just comes down to my schedule. Because I'll probably start doing some internships around that time, but I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what the future holds, but if I can, I will.
Are you a type of guy who does look at the statistics, does like the analytics, wants to be a leader in the statistics for all the categories? Is that something that motivates you after getting, multiple championships? What is it that allows you to maybe potentially want to keep going? Because it sounds like you would want to continue racing as long as the schedule allows it, but how do you show up and be as prepared as you've been in the past? Is it something else that motivates you to keep going for that?
I think to a certain extent, numbers and statistics are cool because into math and stats and things like that. But really, I just like racing. I don't like practicing. I just like hopping in, trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible, and just uh, riding wheel to wheel or whatever with someone and just trying to come out on top. But um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like as long as I'm enjoying the game and I've got the time, and I feel like I've got competition to keep me on my toes, and the motivation and the drive to put in the time required and the effort needed to fight for a championship, it'll be there. So yeah.
Is it since for initially starting in league racing, and I know TCR was not your first league, but um, season 10, what game? 2020 was the game, at least when you entered TCR. What has been, oh, damn, I lost the whole fucking question. Oh, man. What has been, oh, do you still have the same passion as when you first entered league racing and found league racing? Has it changed since then after being so successful in either this league or others? Has the idea of league racing changed for you, or are you having still as much fun as day one?
I think to a certain extent it has changed just because I've got bigger stuff going on in life. I kind of started league racing around the whole time when the pandemic started. So around junior year, senior year of high school, didn't have as much stuff going on, didn't have as many responsibilities, And I've always been a
Those are the
competitive
days.
person. Yeah, definitely. But I've always been a competitive person. I've always competed in sports and stuff like that. So I've done karate, I've done track, done baseball, um, a little bit of soccer, a little bit of football. So yeah, I've always done something competitively. When the pandemic hit, league racing was kind of the thing that filled in that gap.
Hmm.
But as as the pandemic has kind of somewhat come to a close and things have opened up, and I've gone on to college to pursue, hopefully a job in engineering. Um, I would say the need or the feeling that I need to fill that hole, um, like that drive to enter a competition, things like that. It's not quite as strong. I'm still incredibly competitive, so I think if the circumstances call for it, then it's there. But I'd say generally speaking, it's not quite as powerful as it once was.
Do you still compete in any sports leagues or anything, or is that in the past days?
I'd like to,
But you don't.
but yeah, I've been incredibly busy with college.
Now,
I
does this take over that completely? Because for me, I as a competitive person to an extent as well, it's league racing can definitely be that sort of sense of like of an accomplishment of something that you can practice towards, perfect and practice to get to a goal, even if it's not a championship. But you know, in, other individuals will help improve and get to that said goal is kind of very competitive in that sense, but it's very rewarding when you do hit it. And for a lot of others, it's kind of like sports, but I've always said in probably other previous podcasts, it's kind of like you, for the most part, can't do racing in real life, um, unless you have a lot of money to do karting and other stuff. But I mean, you could do other sports a lot more regularly. So esports and sim racing is kind of like the only sporting that you most likely can do. Um, but to me, that's kind of been that nice sense of accomplishment and fulfillment of any competitive nature. So for me, that's kind of the plus in league racing is the putting a goal down, working towards it, and seeing it actually come to fruition.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, it fulfills that role. Maybe not completely. Um, in my senior year of high school, I wasn't able to run track, and that was kind of what I did before league racing. And I was really good at it. Um, one of the people who ran track. Well, actually, it wasn't because of the pandemic, but uh, I just had more stuff going on at the time, so I wasn't able to run track. But basically, one of my friends who I'd been running with pretty much all throughout high school, who I was pretty much always quicker than, he went on to break. I think it was like the record for like the fastest 400-meter time run by a Firestone student. Um, which to a certain extent it kind of annoyed me because I was like, I was always quicker than this guy, and I'd put in a lot of time and effort into getting into shape for that season, and I was definitely in the best shape I'd ever been in, but just couldn't do it. And to this day, it still kind of irks me a little bit.
Well, you could try to go back, try to beat the record. I mean, a couple years later, but
But I mean, it wouldn't be the same because
yeah.
like this random kid just comes over to the track, tries to beat some high school record. I think I don't know.
Well, nowadays it should be easy. The technology in the shoes, you should be able to
Yeah,
a lot easier. beat some records with the technology they have.
Right. And for me, like with competition, I think um, for it to be truly fulfilling, it either has to be physical to some extent. I don't think league racing is very physical, at least compared to anything I've done in the past. I mean, it is mentally taxing, which I do enjoy. I do like,
Physical as in physical exertion, or physical as in real life?
as in like physical exertion. So, like with
Okay.
track, obviously, it's pretty hard on you cardiovascularly and, of course, muscularly. You build up lactic acid, and then it's painful. Because your muscles just kind of start. I don't know. They just try and tell you to stop, but yeah, I kind of like that um, feeling of being tired and knowing that you gave your all mentally and physically. And if it's enough, then I think it's a bit more satisfying than if it's just kind of like um, a mental thing. Even though there is skill involved, it's kind of, I don't know. It doesn't feel quite as um, fulfilling to me, because I mean, when I've won championships in league racing, I've never really been emotional about it. I mean, I'm not really an emotional person, but like when I crossed the line in Bahrain, and I mean, at the time I knew I was champion, I was just kind of like, cool. I did celebrate briefly, um, but then like 10, 15 minutes later, it's like, all right, on to the next one.
Right.
Um, but I think it's kind of like that in general, though. It's like you feel proud for like a short period of time, and then you're kind of hungry for more.
Hmm.
Um, but I think when I look back on things I've accomplished in real life sports and in sim racing, I do feel proud of those moments, and I do I think I kind of enjoy it more looking back at it than I do in the moment. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
You must have some pretty strong shoulders, because I'm pretty sore after the races. I myself, so I meet my physical demands.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as a competition standpoint, who, after a few seasons competing in TCR, who stands out as far as other drivers that really pushed you as far as competition wise, who you really thought were some great drivers? Obviously, there's been a lot of champions, a lot of non-champions as well, but they've had some good races here and there. But does anyone, one or a few, stand out to you over the course of a few seasons here?
I think um, Assassin for sure. I don't think anyone would have predicted just how good he actually went on to be, and probably um, will continue to be, and he'll probably go on and improve even more. But even back in season 11 when we were racing, I was like, okay, yeah, this guy, he's quick, and if he's just starting, he's got some real potential. Um, so he's really impressed me. I think TJ's really impressed me as well. If you look at where he was in season 12, let's say, and compare that to season 13, and you compare season 13 to now, he's made leaps and bounds. And I think he'll continue to make leaps and bounds, because I haven't really seen any signs of him slowing down. Not just in terms of pace, but in terms of racecraft and just race management. Of course, I mean he's made some mistakes like we saw in the last race, but I mean he's a smart guy. He'll learn from it. Um,
It's his first
probably,
season in platinum. I mean, he's not
yeah,
many people from golden win a championship, go to platinum, and then compete for wins on a regular basis, pushing you to an extent on a weekly basis. And that's pretty impressive.
right. And I was his race engineer in season 13, and I could see the progress he was making. And at the end of the season, I was like, "Oh yeah, you should definitely try and get into plat." And he's like, "I'm not ready for plat." I'm like, "Dude, I've pretty much watched like every lap of your season, and golden. So I think I would know if you're ready, considering I've won in platinum before." And turns out I was right. So um, yeah, I don't know how long he'll do it, but if he does continue for a couple more seasons at least, he'll definitely get a championship in my opinion. So yeah, and then with Assassin, I think he's got the potential to get into F1 esports. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
that guy is
he's
incredible.
good. Yeah, I saw in I think he had a race around Jeddah a little while back. Um, and yeah, it's kind of crazy because he's in the same lobby with Yarn Altman. It's like one of the guys I race is now racing against a two-time F1 esports champion. So yeah, it's crazy. Um, yeah, it's like a small world, really.
Yeah, I mean it's a small community, but the fact that he came through TCR, succeeded here, looked elsewhere for more competition, and he just keeps setting the bar up and up and up. And I think for anybody, you put in X amount of time and effort for a specific goal. I mean, eventually, if you're really that determined and motivated, it can really come true. And for his case, absolutely. I mean, he's still really young. I mean, the success he could have in the future is really endless. So, um, I could definitely agree with those two. I have one final question. Um, being three-time platinum class champion and been racing here for quite a while now, what if you do end up continuing in season 15 or 16? What are some things that you would like to see TCR either do as far as a league or um, just kind of what would you hope that would happen in the future um, to I guess if because we like to have the advice of a champion, so I think it would definitely be you know ears all open for it.
Uh, get rid of crossplay. Nah,
Crossplay.
I'm playing. Um,
Of course.
Honestly, I think most stuff is pretty good. I mean, that's kind of a large part of why I'm still racing in TCR. There aren't really many leagues out there that kind of um, execute everything very well. So um, I think being more open to suggestion from drivers is really important. I think we've had a couple instances where some TCR officials have been a little reluctant to listen to the drivers, which um, it doesn't really benefit anyone because I mean these are the guys who have decided to invest time to race in your league. So obviously they have um, the league's best interest at heart because if the league does well, then the experience for them is better. So um, yeah, just that. And honestly, I think that's it. I mean,
Yeah, no, I think
this is definitely one of the better, if not maybe not the best. Well, actually, yeah, probably the best league I've raced in. Um, I mean, I have raced in some Brazilian leagues, and they kind of do some cool stuff with like the broadcast and presentation.
oh,
Um,
it's coming.
yeah, I
Eventually, we'll
haven't.
have to find
Yeah,
someone tech savvy like that.
yeah. I know that stuff is pretty hard to do, so I don't really expect you guys to do all that. And it's just kind of visual stuff. It doesn't actually like, change the racing itself, so it's not really that big of a deal for me. So yeah, that's really it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely can agree to that, and this has been a cool, interesting podcast. We got to hear a lot of insight from TasmanianDevil, or AK B-Tom, your season 14 Platinum class champion. And there's still 3 races left to go, and there's still some championships left to decide. Constructors in the Platinum class. There's also Silver class and Golden class up for grabs. And we do have the All-Star race later on in the season, so stay tuned for that. Just want to say huge thanks for B-Tom or Taz joining us on the podcast. And for those listening, we will definitely get you on the episode. If you were looking to get on here, we will eventually get you on an episode. But until then, make sure to follow TCR on all socials and join the TCR Discord server, where we are the most active. And until next week, thanks Chibar, D'Angelo, and B-Tom. Thanks for listening.